The crimson sands of the grand arena shifted beneath Silas's bare feet as he circled his opponent. 3 years of captivity had stripped away everything but his resolve. His once smooth skin now bore a network of scars, each one a testament to survival against the Valoran Empire's greatest warriors. Today marked his 100th fight. The crowd's roar echoed throughout the massive amphitheater of Kethar. Thousands of green-skinned Valorans pounded their ceremonial staffs against the ground, creating a rhythmic thunder that shook the arena walls. The centennial trial was a sacred tradition, 100 consecutive battles without rest, without mercy. No human had ever survived beyond the 50th match, high above the blood-soaked sands. Tiessa watched from the royal observation deck. Her violet eyes narrowed in concentration. Her emerald skin gleamed beneath ornate ceremonial armor that marked her as nobility, daughter of Arena Master Korath and potential prize for the victor. As tradition demanded. She had observed every one of Silas's battles, watched as the lone human transformed from a desperate prisoner into something the Valorans had never witnessed before, a legend. "He will fall today," her father declared beside her, mandibles clicking with certainty. "The champion of Zul'Kari will end this spectacle." Tiessa said nothing, her gaze fixed on Silas as the Valoran champion charged across the arena, 8-foot frame bristling with muscle and weaponry. The human appeared impossibly small by comparison, armed with only a short gladius and circular shield. Emperor Vorak himself observed from his hovering platform, surrounded by his imperial guard. The trial had drawn the Empire's highest echelons to witness what they believed would be the final humiliation of humanity. The Valoran champion's serrated blade whistled through the air, missing Silas by a hair's breadth. The human didn't flinch. His eyes, the color of steel, remained focused, calculating. 3 years in the arena had taught him patience. "The human fights well," Commander Xeon remarked from Tiessa's left, his battle-scarred face betraying a grudging respect. "But strength always prevails over technique." Tiessa watched as Silas ducked beneath another sweeping attack, his movements economical, precise. "Not always," she whispered. The battle continued, sun climbing higher in Cathra's scorching sky. The Valoran champion grew frustrated, his attacks becoming wilder, less controlled. Silas remained calm, conserving energy, exploiting openings. Blood, both red and blue, stained the crimson sand. Then it happened, the moment that would change the course of the Empire. The champion overextended, his balance compromised by rage and exhaustion. Silas struck with lightning precision, his blade finding the gap between armored plates. The arena fell silent as the champion collapsed, azure blood pooling beneath his massive frame. 100 victories, unbroken, unprecedented. Emperor Vorak rose from his throne, mandibles spread wide in astonishment. The ancient laws were clear. A warrior who defeated 100 opponents in succession could claim his freedom and the hand of the arena master's daughter. "Human!" the Emperor's voice boomed across the stunned arena. "You have accomplished what none believed possible. By the ancient laws of valor, you may claim Tiessa, daughter of Korath, as your mate and earn your freedom." Silence descended as Silas stood amid the carnage, chest heaving, blood dripping from countless wounds. The traditional response was to kneel in gratitude. Silas did not kneel. "I claim only my freedom," he declared, his voice carrying across the hushed arena. "I do not claim any being as a prize." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Arena Master Korath's exoskeleton bristled with outrage. "This is an insult to centuries of tradition!" But Tiessa felt something shift within her at Silas's words. In refusing to claim her as property, he had shown more honor than any warrior she had ever known. Emperor Vorak's compound eyes narrowed. You reject our sacred customs. Human? I reject the notion that any sentient being can be claimed as property, Silas replied, standing tall despite his injuries. Freedom means nothing if it depends on enslaving another. The Emperor's guard moved forward, weapons raised. But Vorak held up a clawed hand. The human has invoked an interesting question of law. We shall convene the imperial court to determine his fate. As Silas was escorted from the arena, his eyes met Tiessa's for a brief moment. She saw in them not the bloodlust of a gladiator, but something far more dangerous to the empire: dignity. The imperial court of Kithar sparkled with polished obsidian and precious metals, its circular chamber designed to intimidate with towering pillars and hovering light orbs. Silas stood at its center, still covered in dried blood and arena dust. The nobility of 7 star systems had gathered to witness this unprecedented challenge to tradition. The law is clear, General Zeon argued, pacing before the assembled council. A fighter who refuses the traditional prize forfeits all claims to freedom. Arena Master Korath nodded emphatically. This human makes a mockery of our most sacred traditions. He should be executed for his insolence. The debate raged for hours. Ancient texts consulted, precedents examined. Through it all, Silas remained silent, his eyes occasionally meeting Tiessa's where she sat among the nobility. Finally, Tiessa rose, silencing the chamber with her unexpected intervention. Honored Council, our laws also state that any being who demonstrates exceptional valor may petition for autonomous recognition. 100 victories without defeat surely qualifies. Her father turned to her, mandibles clicking in disapproval. Daughter, you overstep. I speak only of law, father, she replied calmly. Not preference. The chamber erupted into fresh debate. Emperor Vorak watched with calculating eyes as factions formed, traditionalists against reformers, military against judiciary. Enough, the emperor finally declared. The human has earned the right to be heard. Silas of Earth, what do you propose? Silas stepped forward. I ask only for what your laws already promise: freedom for exceptional service. I have bled for your entertainment 100 times. I have killed your greatest warriors. I have fulfilled every requirement except accepting another being as property. A murmur ran through the assembly. And what of my daughter? Korath demanded. Is she not worthy of your claim? Your daughter deserves to choose her own fate. Silas answered, his gaze steady. As do I, as does every sentient being. The court adjourned without resolution, the emperor declaring a night of deliberation before rendering judgment. As the guards moved to return Silas to his cell, Tiessa stepped forward. I will escort the champion to the outer quarters, she announced, her tone brooking no argument. It is my right as the unclaimed prize. Before her father should object, she had taken Silas by the arm and led him from the chamber. They walked in silence through ornate corridors until reaching a private transport tube. That was dangerous, Silas said once they were alone. Speaking against the council? Tiessa's mandibles curved in what humans might recognize as a smile. Or escorting an unclaimed prize? Both. The transport deposited them in the luxurious outer quarters, typically reserved for visiting dignitaries. Tiessa dismissed the guards with a gesture. Why did you refuse to claim me? She asked when they were alone. Violet eyes studying him intently. Silas met her gaze. Would you want to be claimed? It is our tradition. That doesn't answer my question. Tiessa was silent for a long moment. No, she finally admitted. I would not want to be claimed, but I have never been given a choice. Then I've given you one. Silas replied, and myself as well. Something passed between them, understanding, perhaps, or something deeper. The Emperor will not grant your freedom easily, Tiessa warned. Your refusal has created a dangerous precedent. Freedom is never granted, Silas said softly. It's taken. Tiessa felt a strange flutter in her thoracic cavity, an unfamiliar sensation. Rest, she advised. Tomorrow will determine both our fates. As she turned to leave, Silas spoke again. Thank you for your support in the council. I spoke only truth, she replied, pausing at the threshold. Something rare in these chambers. She did not tell him of the whispers already spreading through the city, of how a human had defeated 100 warriors only to reject his prize in the name of freedom. She did not tell him how his words had awakened something dormant within her own consciousness. She did not tell him of the assassins her father would surely send before dawn. Silas awoke to darkness and the faint sound of metal on metal. Years in the arena had honed his senses. Someone was disabling the quarter's security system. He rolled silently from the bed, positioning himself behind the ornate door. The first assassin entered like a shadow, energy blade humming with deadly intent. Silas struck without hesitation, driving his elbow into the Valoran's breathing apparatus. The attacker collapsed with a muffled gurgle. 2 more figures slipped through the door, moving with the precision of elite Imperial guards. Silas had no weapons beyond his bare hands, but the arena had taught him that everything could become a weapon. He ripped a decorative metal rod from the bed frame, parrying the first energy blade that sliced toward his throat. The quarters erupted into chaos, furniture splintering, energy weapons scorching walls, bodies colliding in deadly combat. Silas fought with the desperate efficiency of a man who had survived 100 death matches. But even he couldn't overcome 3 trained assassins with superior weaponry. A blade sliced across his back, sending him stumbling forward. Another assassin raised his weapon for the killing blow, only to collapse as a ceremonial staff pierced through his chest cavity. Tiessa stood in this doorway, her violet eyes blazing with fury. She moved with a grace Silas had never witnessed in the arena, her staff a blur as she engaged the remaining assassin. The would-be killer never stood a chance. We need to leave, she said, extending a hand to help Silas to his feet. My father's guards will be here soon. You saved my life, Silas observed, pressing a hand against his bleeding wound. You gave me a choice. She replied simply, I've made it. They fled through service corridors, Tiessa leading the way with the confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime exploring the palace's hidden passages. In the distance, alarms began to sound. Why help me? Silas asked as they paused at a junction. Tiessa's expression was unreadable. Because what you said in the arena was right. Because I've watched you fight for 3 years without ever becoming cruel. Because... She hesitated, mandibles clicking softly. Because I choose to... They reached a maintenance bay where a young Valoran with worker caste markings waited nervously. Jonas, Tiessa greeted him. Are the preparations complete? Yes, my lady, the worker replied, eyeing Silas with a mixture of awe and apprehension. But we must hurry. Security protocols are activating throughout the city. Jonas led them to a small reconnaissance ship, its engines already humming with pre-flight sequences. The human resistance has been notified, he whispered to Tiessa. They're mobilizing in 3 sectors. Human resistance? Silas asked sharply. Did you think you were fighting alone all this time? Tiessa replied. Your defiance in the arena today was the signal they've been waiting for. As they boarded the ship, Silas realized the magnitude of what was happening. His personal stand for freedom had ignited something far larger, a coordinated rebellion that had been building beneath the surface of Valoran rule. Jonas took the pilot's seat, his six-fingered hands dancing across the controls. Launching in 30 seconds. You're risking everything, Silas said to Tiessa as they strapped into acceleration harnesses. She met his gaze without hesitation. Some things are worth the risk. The ship lurched forward, bursting from the maintenance bay into Cathra's dawn sky. Behind them, the Imperial Palace erupted with activity, defense turrets swiveling, fighter craft scrambling. We have pursuit, Jonas called, his voice tense. Imperial interceptors, closing fast. Tiessa moved to the weapons console. Can we reach orbit? Maybe, Jonas replied, banking the ship sharply to avoid incoming fire. But the blockade? Take us to the VNS Retribution, she instructed. Jonas looked back in alarm. The military flagship? That's suicide. It's our only chance, she insisted. Commander Thex is bound by the Code of Combat. Silas understood her strategy immediately. The right of challenge, he said. If I can defeat their commander in single combat, then legally they cannot prevent our departure. Tiessa finished. It's an ancient provision, rarely invoked. And if I fail? Her violet eyes met his. Then we die together, as free beings. The reconnaissance ship screamed through Cathra's upper atmosphere, pursued by a squadron of Imperial fighters. Jonas's piloting skills kept them just ahead of destruction, but their small craft couldn't outrun military vessels for long. Incoming transmission, Jonas announced as they approached the massive silhouette of the VNS Retribution. Commander Thex's stern visage appeared on the view screen. Mandibles clicked in the position of formal authority. Unidentified vessel. You are ordered to power down and prepare for boarding. Resistance will result in immediate destruction. Silas stepped forward. Commander Thex, I am Silas of Earth, victor of 100 arena battles. I invoke the right of challenge under the Valoran Code of Combat. A long silence followed. The commander's compound eyes reflected the light of distant stars as he considered the implications. The right of challenge has not been invoked in 7 generations. He finally replied, You understand that failure means death. I do. Then prepare to board. You will have 1 standard cycle to prepare. The transmission ended, and Jonas guided their ship toward the Retribution's docking bay. He accepted, Tiessa said, surprise evident in her voice. Thex is old guard, Jonas explained. Traditional to his core. He won't violate the code, even for the Emperor himself. As they docked with the massive warship, Silas turned to Tiessa. If this goes wrong, she placed a 3-fingered hand on his arm. It won't. The combat chamber aboard the VNS Retribution was austere and functional, a stark contrast to the ornate arena of Kithar. 100 Valoran officers lined the walls, watching in silence as Silas and Commander Thex circled each other on the polished metal floor. Thex was older than most Valoran warriors, his exoskeleton bearing the distinctive blue-black patterns of a veteran campaigner. He wielded a traditional plasma glaive with the easy confidence of decades of experience. You fight for more than your life today. Human. Thex observed, his voice carrying in the quiet chamber. You fight for a dangerous idea. Freedom is only dangerous to those who fear it, Silas replied, testing the weight of the standard combat staff he'd been provided. Tiessa and Jonas watched from the observation area, surrounded by suspicious Valoran officers. The stakes extended far beyond this single combat, across the Valoran Empire. Communications networks were carrying news of the human who had defied tradition and sparked rebellion. The combat began without ceremony. Thex attacked with precision and economy, his movements belying his age. Silas defended desperately, his staff a blur as he parried strikes that could slice through metal. "He's holding back," Jonas whispered to Tiessa. The commander could have ended this already. "He's testing him," Tiessa replied, watching intently. "Looking for something." The duel continued, both combatants probing for weaknesses, studying each other's techniques. Unlike the brutal spectacles of the arena, this was a battle of skill and strategy. Minutes stretched into an hour, neither fighter gaining decisive advantage. Then Thex spoke, his voice pitched low enough that only Silas could hear. "You could have killed me 3 times already. Human. Why hesitate?" "I've killed enough," Silas replied between breaths. "I fight for freedom, not more death." Something changed in Thex's compound eyes. "Then show me what you fight for." The commander's next attack left him deliberately exposed. Silas recognized the opening, but refused to exploit it lethally. Instead, he struck with the blunt end of his staff, sending Thex crashing to the floor, disarmed but alive. Silence filled the chamber. Tradition demanded death for the defeated. Silas planted his staff on the deck and extended a hand to the fallen commander. "Your life is yours, Commander, as all lives should be." Thex regarded the offered hand for a long moment before taking it. Rising to his feet, he addressed the assembled officers. "The human has won the challenge with honor and mercy. By the code, his ship and companions are granted safe passage." A murmur ran through the Valoran officers. Silas had won more than combat. He had won respect. But as they prepared to return to their ship, alarms blared throughout the Retribution. A young communications officer burst into the chamber. "Commander, Admiral Corvus's battle group has arrived in system. They're demanding the human be surrendered immediately." Thex's mandibles clicked in concern. "How many ships?" 7 dreadnoughts, sir, and the Imperial flagship." The commander turned to Silas and Tiessa. "The Admiral does not share my respect for the ancient codes. He will destroy this vessel if necessary to capture you. Then we surrender." Silas said immediately, "I won't be responsible for more deaths." "No," a new voice interrupted. A female Valoran officer stepped forward, her insignia marking her as Commander Kira. "There is another option." She activated a holographic display showing tactical positions. Human resistance cells have seized control of 3 orbital platforms. They've managed to disable the planetary defense grid in sectors 7 through 12. "How is this possible?" Thex demanded. "They've been planning for years, sir," Kira replied. "Waiting for a catalyst." Her gaze shifted to Silas. "They found one." Jonas stepped forward. "If we can get a transmission to the resistance leaders, we could coordinate a breakout through the disabled grid sectors." Commander Thex studied the tactical display, his experienced eyes assessing possibilities. After a long moment, he straightened to his full height. "Commander Kira, prepare battle stations. We are exercising Emergency Protocol 937. The officers exchanged shocked glances. Protocol 937 allowed a commander to refuse orders believed to violate the foundational principles of Valoran society. "Sir?" Kira saluted sharply. "And the human?" Thex turned to Silas. "He has proven himself a warrior of honor. We will escort his vessel to the edge of the system." That's mutiny, Jonas whispered. That's conscience, Tiessa corrected. As they raced back to their ship, the VNS Retribution erupted with activity, weapons powering up, shields reinforcing, crew rushing to battle stations. Commander Kira accompanied them to the docking bay. The resistance leaders are calling for full uprising across 7 systems. She informed them. They're rallying behind your name, Silas of Earth. I never wanted to start a war, Silas said grimly. Wars begin when injustice goes unchallenged for too long. Kira replied, What happens next was inevitable. You simply provided the spark. As their small ship launched from the Retribution, they witnessed the awesome spectacle of Admiral Corvus's battle group emerging from hyperspace, massive dreadnoughts bristling with weapons capable of reducing planets to ash. Incoming transmission, Jonas announced, his voice tight with tension. Emperor Vorak's face filled their view screen, his compound eyes glittering with cold fury. Human, he hissed. You have sown chaos throughout my empire. Surrender now, and your death will be merciful. This was never about me, Silas replied calmly. This is about freedom, for humans, for Valorans, for all sentient beings forced to live under tyranny. You speak of freedom while planets burn. The Emperor spat. Already, 3 worlds have declared open rebellion. Blood flows in the streets of a dozen cities. The blood was always flowing, Tiessa interjected, stepping into view. You simply never had to see it. Vorak's mandibles clicked in rage at the sight of her. Daughter of Korath, your betrayal cuts deepest of all. You were to be the symbol of our traditions. I choose to be a symbol of change instead, she replied, her voice steady despite the fear Silas could sense within her. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Then you will die with the human and his rebellion. All ships, open. The transmission cut abruptly as space around them erupted into chaos. The Retribution had opened fire on the Admiral's flagship, its powerful weapons tearing through the larger vessel's forward shields. More ships incoming, Jonas called out, his hands dancing across the controls. But these weren't Imperial vessels. Dozens of ships of various sizes and configurations dropped out of hyperspace, a motley fleet of human vessels, resistance fighters, and even several Valoran military ships that had apparently joined the rebellion. This is Captain Vex of the Free Vessel Horizon. A new voice announced over the comm system. Silas, Tiessa, get your ship to these coordinates. The Emperor won't risk destroying Nexus Prime. As their small craft accelerated away from the developing space battle, Silas watched the tactical display with a mixture of hope and horror. What had begun as his personal stand for freedom had erupted into full-scale revolution. Jonas, he said quietly, set course for Nexus Prime. Nexus Prime? Tiessa questioned. That's the Imperial ceremonial world. Silas nodded. And the site of the ancient Void Dome arena where, according to your traditions, disputes of galactic significance are settled by single combat. Understanding dawned in Tiessa's violet eyes. You're challenging the Emperor himself. It's the only way to end this without millions dying. Silas replied, one final trial. Jonas programmed the coordinates, his expression grim. The Emperor will never agree. He will, Tiessa said with certainty. His pride won't allow him to refuse. Their ship slipped into hyperspace, leaving behind the chaos of battle. Silas stood at the viewport, watching the streaming lights of faster-than-light travel. You don't have to come with me, he said to Tiessa, who stood beside him. I made my choice the moment I saved you from those assassins. She replied, I won't leave you now. Something unspoken passed between them, a connection that transcended their different physiologies, different worlds, different histories. In the midst of galactic upheaval, they had found something neither had expected: understanding. "If I fail," Silas began. "You won't," Tiessa interrupted, placing her hand over his. "And even if you did, what you've started can't be undone. Look." She gestured to a communications panel where messages were pouring in from across the Empire, reports of uprisings, defections, calls for reform. The revolution had taken on a life of its own, spreading faster than Imperial forces could contain it. 100 battles brought you to this moment," she said softly. "The 101st will decide the future of worlds." Nexus Prime gleamed like a jewel against the velvet backdrop of space, its artificially perfect continents and oceans visible even from orbit. At the planet's north pole stood the Void Dome, an ancient arena constructed during the early days of the Valoran Empire, where the most significant disputes in galactic history had been settled through ritual combat. By the time Silas, Tiessa, and Jonas arrived, news of the challenge had spread throughout the Empire. Millions watched on communication networks as the Emperor's flagship took up position in orbit alongside hundreds of vessels representing both Imperial forces and the growing rebellion. The Void Dome itself was a marvel of ancient engineering, a perfect hemisphere of transparent material stronger than any modern alloy, enclosing an arena of polished stone. The dome's unique properties allowed spectators to view the combat from any angle, while creating the illusion that the combatants fought at the edge of space itself. Stars visible through the transparent floor. Emperor Vorak arrived with full Imperial ceremony, his massive flagship dispatching a golden shuttle that descended to the surface with an honor guard of 100 elite warriors. Silas arrived in Captain Vex's battered transport, accompanied only by Tiessa and Jonas. "This is madness," Jonas muttered as they approached the dome's entrance. "The Emperor has never been defeated in combat." "There's always a first time," Silas replied, his eyes fixed on the gleaming structure ahead. The Void Dome's interior was even more impressive than its exterior, a perfect circle of obsidian stone surrounded by tiered seating that accommodated thousands. Above, the transparent dome revealed the stars and the assembled fleets in orbit. Below, through the transparent floor, the swirling clouds of Nexus Prime created the sensation of standing on nothingness. Emperor Vorak awaited at the center of the arena, resplendent in ceremonial battle armor adorned with the symbols of 100 conquered worlds. Without his hovering platform and imperial regalia, he was still an imposing figure, taller than most Valorans, his exoskeleton bearing the distinctive patterns of the royal bloodline. The assembled spectators fell silent as Silas stepped onto the combat circle, wearing only the simple tunic and trousers of a gladiator. In his hand, he carried the same short gladius he had wielded in his first arena battle 3 years earlier. "You challenge the Empire itself! Human!" Vorak's voice echoed throughout the dome. "Do you understand the consequences of your actions?" "I challenge only you," Silas replied, his voice carrying with unexpected authority, "and the idea that any being has the right to own another." The Emperor's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Noble sentiments from a creature whose species enslaved its own kind for centuries. "We learn from our mistakes," Silas acknowledged. "Now it's your turn." Vorak raised his ceremonial war staff, a weapon that had ended the lives of a dozen challengers over his long reign. "By the ancient laws of combat, we fight until submission or death. There is no middle ground." "I accept these terms," Silas replied, raising his gladius in the traditional salute of the arena. The combat began with explosive violence. The Emperor moved with surprising speed for his size, his war staff creating a blur of motion that forced Silas into immediate defense. The human dodged and parried, giving ground before the onslaught. From the observation area, Tiessa watched with tightly controlled fear. She had seen Silas fight 100 times, but never against an opponent of Vorak's caliber. The Emperor combined the raw power of his species with centuries of combat experience, a devastating combination. The first exchange ended with Silas bleeding from a gash across his shoulder. The Emperor circled, mandibles spread in a predatory display. "You are skilled, human." Vorak acknowledged, but skill alone cannot overcome natural superiority. Silas adjusted his grip on the gladius. "Natural superiority? Is that what you call it when you force others to fight your battles while you watch from safety?" The taunt struck home. Vorak attacked again, his movements more aggressive, less controlled. Silas exploited the opening, his blade slicing across the Emperor's leg armor, drawing first blood. The audience gasped. No challenger had wounded Emperor Vorak in living memory. The combat intensified, both fighters pushing themselves to their physical limits. Silas fought with the desperation of someone carrying the hopes of millions. Vorak fought with the fury of an absolute ruler, facing his first true challenge. Blood, both red and blue, stained the obsidian floor. Neither combatant sought advantage in the other's injuries. This was a test of will as much as strength. "You cannot win!" Vorak hissed during a momentary pause, his breathing labored. "Even if you defeat me, the Empire will never accept a human as victor." "I don't fight to rule your empire," Silas replied, equally exhausted. "I fight so no one has to live as property again." They clashed once more, weapons connecting with bone-jarring force. Silas was driven to his knees by a powerful blow, his gladius skittering across the smooth floor. The Emperor raised his staff for the killing strike. "Your rebellion ends here, human." But Silas had learned more in the arena than just combat. He had learned that survival sometimes required unconventional tactics. As the staff descended, he rolled forward instead of away, crashing into the Emperor's legs. Both combatants tumbled to the ground, wrestling for advantage on the blood-slicked floor. Vorak's superior strength should have ended the contest immediately, but 3 years of constant battle had hardened Silas beyond normal human limits. He fought with desperate efficiency, targeting the vulnerable joints in the Emperor's exoskeleton. The audience watched in stunned silence as Human and Valoran grappled at the edge of the combat circle, dangerously close to the transparent section of floor. Through it, the swirling clouds of Nexus Prime created a dizzying backdrop to their struggle. With a final surge of strength, Vorak pinned Silas to the ground, one clawed hand wrapped around the human's throat. "Submit or die," he snarled. Silas's vision began to darken as the Emperor's grip tightened. In that moment, his eyes found Tiessa in the audience, her violet gaze fixed on him with an intensity that transcended species. With his last reserves of strength, Silas twisted violently, leveraging the Emperor's weight against him. They rolled once more, directly onto the transparent section of floor. The unique material of the void dome created perfect optical illusions. To both combatants, it suddenly appeared as if they fought suspended above an endless drop, with nothing but clouds and atmosphere beneath them. The Emperor's instinctive reaction, a momentary tensing of muscles, a shift in balance to avoid the perceived fall, gave Silas the opening he needed. He broke free of the chokehold and scrambled to retrieve his fallen gladius. As Vorak regained his footing, Silas attacked with renewed purpose. The gladius found the gap between the Emperor's chest plates, penetrating just deep enough to draw blood, but not to kill. Silas stepped back, blade poised. "Yield!" he demanded. The Emperor looked down at the azure blood seeping from his wound, then at the human standing before him, bloodied, exhausted, but unbowed. "I cannot," Vorak replied, his voice barely audible. "Then we both die here," Silas said simply. "And the war continues until your empire burns itself to ash." For a long moment, the void dome was utterly silent. Then, with deliberate slowness, Emperor Vorak lowered his war staff to the ground. "I yield," he declared, his voice echoing throughout the dome and across the communication networks of 1,000 worlds. The implications of those two words rippled outward like a shockwave. In orbital battle zones across 7 systems, weapons fell silent. In the streets of 12 worlds, resistance fighters and Imperial troops alike paused in disbelief. Silas extended his hand to the kneeling Emperor. "Rise," he said, "not as my subject, but as the leader of a new era." Vorak regarded the offered hand with compound eyes that had witnessed centuries of Imperial history. After a moment's hesitation, he accepted it. "What do you propose, Victor?" he asked as he rose to his feet. "A coalition," Silas replied, raising his voice to address the assembled audience and the millions watching across space. "Not an empire based on conquest, but a union of free worlds where no sentient being owns another." On the observation deck, Commander Kira stepped forward to stand beside Tiessa and Jonas. "It will not be easy," she warned. "Centuries of tradition do not change in a day." "But they can begin to change in a day," Tiessa replied, her eyes never leaving Silas. 5 years passed, a mere moment in galactic history, but a lifetime for those who had fought for change. The New Harmony orbital station rotated serenely above a blue-green world that had once been a Valoran military outpost. Now it served as the headquarters for the Coalition of Free Worlds, an alliance of former Imperial planets and human colonies united by shared principles rather than force. Silas stood at the observation window of his quarters, watching shuttlecraft coming and going from the station's docking bays. Some carried Valoran diplomats, others human traders, still others representatives from species that had been marginalized under Imperial rule. "Contemplating your handiwork?" Tiessa asked as she joined him at the window, her violet eyes following his gaze. "Contemplating how quickly everything changed," he replied, turning to face her. 5 years had changed them both. Silas's once dark hair now showed streaks of premature gray, and new scars had joined the collection from his arena days, not from combat, but from assassination attempts by Imperial loyalists who refused to accept the new order. Tiessa had changed, too. Her once formal bearing had softened, and she had adopted elements of human dress that better accommodated her diplomatic role. The ceremonial armor was gone, replaced by practical clothing that represented her position as coalition ambassador. "Not quickly enough for some," she observed. "The outer systems are still resistant to the anti-slavery provisions." "They'll come around," Silas said with quiet confidence. "Freedom is contagious." A chime sounded, and the door to their quarters slid open. 2 small figures burst into the room, one with human features and greenish skin, the other with distinctly Valoran characteristics, but human eyes. "Father!" they called in unison, racing to Silas with the boundless energy of childhood. He knelt to embrace them, still marveling at the miracle of their existence. When the xenobiologists had confirmed that human and Valoran DNA could be combined, it had sent shockwaves through both societies. Now, 5 years later, Silas and Tiessa's children were living symbols of what the coalition represented, unity without erasing differences. "Were you good for Dr. Ilara?" Tiessa asked, her mandibles forming the expression humans had learned to recognize as a smile. Iris, we helped calibrate the new communication array, the older child announced proudly. I did the frequency adjustments. With some supervision, a new voice added as Jonas entered the room, his worker caste markings now replaced by the insignia of the Coalition Science Division. They're naturals with technology. Both of them. Silas straightened, one child still clinging to his leg. Any word from the Catharian delegation? Jonas nodded. They've agreed to attend the anniversary summit. Even General Zeon will be there. And my father? Tiessa asked quietly. Jonas's expression sobered. Arena Master Korath still refuses official contact, but... He hesitated. But, Silas prompted. He sent a personal message for his grandchildren. Jonas finished, producing a small data crystal. No political content, just family matters. Tiessa accepted the crystal, emotions playing across her features in ways only Silas had learned to read fully. That's progress, she said finally. Later, as the station's lighting dimmed to simulate evening, Silas and Tiessa stood on their private balcony overlooking the hydroponics gardens where their children played with others of mixed heritage, the first generation to grow up without knowing imperial rule. Sometimes I still expect to wake up in the arena, Silas admitted, his hand finding hers, to discover this was all a gladiator's dying dream. Too imperfect to be a dream, Tiessa replied. The Coalition struggles daily. Half the reforms we proposed have been watered down or delayed. 3 systems have threatened to secede. And yet, Silas gestured toward their children. Look what we've built. Below them, the garden bloomed with plants from dozens of worlds. Human children played alongside Valoran youngsters and the growing number of mixed heritage offspring. Former Imperial officers conversed with one-time resistance fighters. 100 battles to earn the right to challenge tradition. Tiessa mused. And then one more to change the course of history. The most important battle wasn't in the arena or the Void Dome, Silas said, turning to face her. It was when you chose to save a human gladiator from assassins. I chose freedom, she corrected him. For myself as much as for you. As twilight deepened, the station's position revealed a spectacular view of the galaxy's spiral arm, countless stars where the Coalition's influence was spreading, carrying with it the radical idea that freedom wasn't just a word, but a lived reality. The next day would bring new challenges, diplomatic crises, economic negotiations, the endless work of building a society where different species could coexist as equals. But for now, as their children's laughter echoed from the garden below, Silas and Tiessa allowed themselves to simply exist in the moment they had fought so hard to create. Freedom, they had learned, wasn't a destination but a journey, one that continued with each new dawn, each new generation, each choice to recognize the dignity in all sentient beings. And it had begun with a single act of defiance, a gladiator who refused to claim another being as a prize.